Hey, Paul, I know this is probably a bad time to bring this up, but you remember that time that I loaned you $5?
Man, you dangle that over my head all the time. You want me to Venmo you? You want me to Venmo you $4.99?
No, the full $5 would be great because I don't have to keep coming after you for that last penny.
Inflation adjusted. I mean, buddy, you're losing out.
Well, it could be with the 10% interest I've been charging for the past 6 years since.
What?
I bought you that drink at FinCon 6 years ago. Remember that?
For what? For 99 cents? Speaking of people who loan people money but then hold it over their heads, we're going to be talking about that.
Are we?
We were foreshadowing. We're going to be talking about that as well as many other questions on today's episode. Welcome to the Afford Anything podcast, the show that understands you can afford anything, but not everything. Every choice that you make carries a trade-off, and that applies to your money, to your time, to your energy, to any limited resource that you need to manage. Now, every other episode, we answer questions that come from you, the community. My name is Paula Pant. I'm the host, and my buddy, Joe Saul-Sehy, joins me to answer these questions. You're a former financial planner, Joe. I
am, and I'm apparently a loan shark.
Right. And speaking of loan sharks... Oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. Speaking of awkward loan situations, yes. Right? Speaking of awkward loan situations that might impact the relationship between two people, our first caller has this to say.
This is anonymous. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm 26. I make about 77 grand. And right now I am renting an apartment with my roommate. We've had just really insane increases in our rent costs, like 17% last year, and it's going to be 7% this year. And it's just insane. And my dad is talking about lending me not just a down payment, but actually lending, like standing in the place of a conventional mortgage and providing cash for me to purchase a home. That is way outside of what I would be able to afford right now with interest rates as they are. I've kind of crunched the numbers. I could afford something in the $190,000 range with a 6% interest rate if I could save up, like a 7% down payment over the next couple of years. That would be reasonable for me. He's pointing out houses that are $350,000 that are just, after we talk about insurance, which is really expensive in Florida, homeowners insurance, and all of the other costs, we're looking at, a monthly payment that's more than half my take home. So he's talking about we could just lend you the money for the home on a 4% instead of a 6% interest rate. And I don't know what to do with that information. Is this something that people have done before? Should I even lend serious credence to this? And if he's serious, he's talked about it a couple times, where either giving me a down payment out of my future inheritance, and this is the first time that he's talked about actually lending me the entire balance of the cost of the home. What should I consider putting in place before I do that? Because it sounds like it's right for awkward Thanksgiving dinner conversations if my dad owns my home and I'm his tenant. Background of this conversation is that this has been a longstanding issue in our family where, he gave me my first car when I turned 16, and anytime he got mad, he would threaten to take it away. And it's I don't want to have that hanging over my head, but also having the security of knowing my housing cost is not going to go up would just alleviate a lot of stress from my mind. So how can I think about this? Is there anything contractually that I should put in place for both of us before we do this? I don't have any other friends or any other people that I've heard of who have done something like this. So I just would love your advice and thoughts. Thank you.
Wow, what a question, Paula. And before we answer that, we have to give her a name.
We do have to give her a name. Yeah, she's anonymous.
As we record this, I saw you in a bunch of robes recently. What's that all about? Standing in this place with some robes on and a weird looking flat hat. What is that?
That's true. On Wednesday the 17th, I graduated from Columbia University with a master's in business and economics journalism. Thank you.
we do need to give this woman a name now that you've graduated.
Right. Well, I mean, because golden handcuffs is kind of the situation she's describing. She's describing a golden handcuff situation where she accepts money, but is tethered to an awkward situation as a result. So first, we give her a name because she's anonymous. And the name that I would like to give her is Minouche, in honor of Minouche Shafiq, a leading economist who is the incoming president of Columbia University.
Oh, sweet.
So, Minouche, this answer is for you. I have so many thoughts. First of all, the most important thing that you've said in your question is that your father in the past has loaned you money or helped you out financially, but then has used it as a method of control, right? He helped you buy a car, but then threatened to take it away. That to me is a massive red flag. If someone is going to loan you money, but then use it to try to pull the puppet strings, in my opinion, it's best to just walk away. And that's for two reasons. One is you don't want him to be able to control you through the purse strings. The second is that you yourself are going to feel significantly greater pride, joy, confidence when you are able to do this on your own without getting support with strings attached. Now, you mentioned a couple of other things that also triggered some red flags for me. One is that you would be perfectly happy purchasing a home for $190,000, and it sounds like there are homes in your area at that price point. You'd be perfectly happy at that lower price point. He's trying to direct you towards homes that are $350,000, which means if you were to buy a house at that price point, you would be indebted for a lot longer, which means he could control you for a lot longer or make things awkward at the dinner table for a lot longer. You don't want to be on the hook. And yes, I know there are plenty of people who are probably shouting into their radios right now saying, you know what, you can always refinance. But if someone has a history like what you've described, it's best not to do a deal with them in the first place. And if you would be happy in a home that costs $190, then there's no reason to buy a home that costs $350, given that the $190 home is available in your area. For you to be able to buy that $190,000 home, you mentioned you need a 7% down payment. I'm curious as to where you got the 7% figure from. It's very specific, so I trust you got it from somewhere. An FHA loan requires a minimum of 3.5% down, so you could come to the table with as little as 3.5. But let's take 7%. Running with that number, 7% of $190,000 is $13,000, $13,300. So your aim is to save up a down payment of $13,000. Now, you can do that in 1 to 1.5 years. With a savings of $1,000 a month, you'll have that in about a year and a month. With a savings of $738 a month, you'll have it in a year and a half. And pulling together those savings, yeah, that's going to require some sacrifice. Fewer dinners out, fewer trips. Maybe you develop a side hustle on the weekends. You start tutoring kindergartners in how to tie their shoes, or you walk dogs, or pet sit, or help 6th graders with their math homework. But a year from now, or a year and a half from now, when you've saved that down payment on your own, you'll be able to buy that house with no strings attached. And that's going to feel a lot better.
You know, staying away from the awkward Thanksgiving piece of this question for a moment, what I really like, no matter which path she decides to choose, is doing the one that she can financially afford to do without help, the payment she can afford to do without help. And it's not always dad doing this. It's friends, pressuring you to go out to an expensive restaurant when you don't have the money, or take this vacation with them that everybody else is guilting you into, and personally you can't afford, but you don't want to be the odd person out. So you agree to go on this expensive vacation. You're going to get this pressure all the time, and being able to stick to what you value and do the thing that is right for your financial situation is always the winning move.
Right.
Because you'll feel so much power. You will feel so much more confident when you're living inside of a house, like even if she takes dad's, let's say she decides to go to the bank of dad against your advice, Paula, it's going to be much easier for her in that room if she has a mortgage she knows she can afford and she's able to get out of it at any point. Like, how great would it be if dad goes, well, I'm taking the house away. And she's like, whatever, I'm going to a bank now. I took you for the extra 3 percentage points that I couldn't get from a bank. And so let's do this. I'll go ahead and move the money over to a bank. She's in control then, you know? So if she decides to not go through a bank and take an interest rate through dad that's a lot cheaper, but she can go to the bank anytime she wants. Now she's not under dad's thumb, which I think is the position that she wants to be in.
Yeah, Manoush, no matter what, you don't want to be in a position where approximately half of your take-home pay is going towards your housing costs, which is what you would be in if you got that more expensive home. You want to be buying the cheaper home and then living there with a roommate to help you offset some of those costs.
The conventional rule of thumb is you want to keep that number under 30% of your take-home pay. And by the way, we have a lot of people listening to this who Paula, you and I, we've heard these people. They are much more aggressive savers. For those people, 30% is even way too high. Like 15% might be a better number. So the lower you make that number, the easier it's going to be to get your other goals more quickly.
Exactly. The 3 biggest expenses that the average American pays are housing, transportation, and food. If you can focus on the big 3, then you don't have to worry about the small stuff. And
Beer's
of those 3, sorry, what did you say, Joe?
Beer's not in there. I'm surprised.
I think that's
food, housing, and Michelob.
I think beer's a form of food. A form of
it is.
food.
That's right. Hops and barley. Okay,
exactly.
We're good.
It's sustenance. Now, Manoush, if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know I typically don't come out hardline and say, do this, don't do that, right? I typically say, let's take a look at the options. Here's the pros and cons. I am pretty hardline about don't take this loan from dad because for the cost of an extra 2 or 3 percentage points, you get to preserve your autonomy and your independence. And when you think back on how you got into this home, you'll also have the confidence that comes from knowing that you did it on your own, that you spent your Saturday afternoons walking dogs and tutoring 6th graders in order to save up money, $100 at a time, to accumulate that down payment. And, you know, the control thing, that's what my mind keeps going back to. That history of threatening to take your car away whenever he didn't like how you were acting. Sure, that can fly when you're 16, but you're 26. And if he starts up with stuff like that now, I mean, what are you going to do when you want to live with a partner and he doesn't want that person there, right? What are you going to do when you want to take in some roommates, but he might not approve of your choice of roommate? Or when you turn 30 and you want to throw a giant house party and maybe he doesn't approve of that?
I don't know, Paula. I do think that it's about, I hear everything that you're saying, and I do think it's about the ability to maintain autonomy and control. If I can get a loan through a bank, I'm going to get it at nearly double the interest rate that dad's offering.
Worth it.
I don't think so. I think if she can get the loan through the bank, but dad will give her the interest rate at a lower number, I think I'd take it through dad. Dad then becomes a pain in the ass. Then I just go to the bank.
Hard no.
I know I've got my out. I can save so much money and I have my out.
Hard no for me. Hard no.
I think it depends on how bad dad truly is at this stuff. I mean, I think we're not in this household. I mean, if it is abusive behavior, that's one thing. If it's dad is a nitpicky dude, you know.
But the influence, just think about what's going to happen when dad's like, your partner can't move in unless you're engaged.
Well, then you go to the bank. Then you go to the bank.
But that influence is still there. That influence still permeates your mind and it influences your decisions in ways that are both direct and subconscious.
But you're assuming that dad's not going to do that if he doesn't own part of the house. Dad's going to do that either way. Dad's going to do that whether he owns the house or not. Like, he's not going to stop being the parent that he's been, for better or worse, whether he owns a piece of the house or not. And it's still going to bother you.
But the more distance you create, the better. It's one thing if like you and your partner are living in a different state and your dad's on the phone being like, you guys have to get engaged. But it's another thing if you live in the same city and he owns your house and he's like, partner can't move in unless you're engaged, right? Like it's
what's
a
the
different
difference?
form.
I don't.
The level of influence, the way that it permeates your mind, the pressure that it puts on you, the way that influences your decisions. What if you kowtow? What if you do end up getting engaged and then 10 years later you look back and you're like, that was a wrong choice. You know, it can set you off on a trajectory that just robs you of years of your 20s and 30s.
I don't think there's going to be any difference. I think there's going to be no difference whether he owns a piece of that house or not.
The more control you give, the more control and influence that you give.
But that's my
him
point,
over
Paula.
your
I don't
life.
think you're giving him any control. If you can go to a bank whenever the hell you want and flip that, all you're doing him is taking him for the free bucks. That's all you're doing.
No, stay clear.
Life lesson, folks.
The way that it permeates your mind and impacts your decision making, even at the subconscious level.
I think he's going to do that either way. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it.
But he's going to have why give somebody like that a greater degree of influence over your life? You know?
I don't think that's my point. I don't think it is a greater degree. I think it's the same degree either way. It's the same
degree.
degree.
To disagree, Joe. I think, yeah.
Well, and I think if you think there's a difference, I think it's in your head. Like, I think you're in you talk about being in a different state. I think you're in a state of delusion if you think that it's a different amount of influence. If I can do it wherever the hell I want, well, then that I can control that. I can control how much influence I'm giving him, how much mental space I'm giving him.
Degree. No, like you don't have that degree of complete control over your mind. Even the Dalai Lama, even the most Zen Buddhist monk doesn't have that degree of control over their mind. Your mind is subject to...
I think you're still going to feel the emotion either way. I don't think there's going to be a difference. Is there going to be a degree of difference? Is there truly going to be a degree of difference?
Absolutely.
I don't think there is.
When someone controls the purse strings, they have a greater degree of influence.
But that's the point. He doesn't control the purse strings. You control the purse strings.
Then control it from the beginning by just not doing the deal in the first place. If she wants to save money, there are better ways to save money than to do a deal with somebody who is going to hold it over her head. If she wants to save money, she can get an additional roommate, partition off part of the living room, and make it an additional bedroom and get in a third roommate, right? That would be a better way to save money. She can swear off travel for the next couple of years. She can give up alcohol and no longer have a bar tab. Or she could go the other route. She could side hustle it up. She can learn how to be a graphic designer and do freelance graphic design projects in the evenings. Like, there are so many better ways in which she will be able to recoup any additional money that she might have to pay to a bank and do it on her own terms.
Well, I think she heard. She knows what she's feeling right now.
Yeah. Manoush, I guess if you are going to do it, you asked about like what agreements you should draw up. If you are going to do it, then what I want you to Google is private lender or hard money lender. There are plenty of templates online of agreements drawn up between private lenders who are lending money for real estate transactions. You'll want to use a similar type of agreement because fundamentally, if you forget about the fact that this is your dad, fundamentally, you are doing the equivalent of taking out a private loan that is secured by a piece of real estate. And so, in terms of the paperwork, the promissory note, you'll want to go through those same paces and most definitely hire a lawyer. Don't let your dad talk you out of that. You 100% want to spend the money to get a lawyer to do it right. And the lawyer should be representing you, not representing, you and your dad are two distinct parties. You have your lawyer yourself, who you pay for, who represents you and only you in putting this together. So if you are going to do it, then use the model of private lending or the model of hard money lending, and do not skimp on hiring an attorney. That is money well spent. But I maintain that it's a terrible idea.
Manoush, remember that sometimes you'll just make the wrong decision. And so I also think about, if I go one way versus the other, what's the fallout going to be if I make the worst decision? We used to, Paula, play this game a lot when I was a financial planner. This is a tough decision. If I go the wrong way, what's the fallout? And I would do almost like, they had that Ben Franklin thing where you put the positives and negatives, but I would take the two different decisions and I do the negatives from one versus the negatives from the other. Like, so what's my worst case scenario? And no matter which one you choose, just remember that there are times, and I'm sure that you knew, when you bit off, more than you could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, remember that you ate it up and spit it out. You faced it all, and you stood tall, and you did it your way.
What? Joe, for a moment I thought you were quoting Dr. Seuss, but clearly not.
Quoting Frank Sinatra. I was holding back on that. I wasn't going to do that. But when you said do it your way, I immediately thought, oh, I did it my way. All right.
All right. Well, with that, Manoush, thank you for the question, and best of luck with whichever you decide.